The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. You're listening to the Everyday Therapy Podcast. I'm JC Rader.
And I'm Julian Schroeder.
And we're therapists bringing you honest conversations around emotional wellness and self-development.
Inspired by our personal experiences in therapy and because of our clients, we realize therapy has so much to offer both on and off the couch. Listen for tips and tools to navigate all the challenges that life throws your way.
To give us feedback on topics and guests, or for more information on our community events, counseling, or online services, contact us at everydaytherapypodcast.com. Let's get right into our supporters. So the Lifeology Institute is a group private practice here in the heart of Dallas, and they are located all over the DFW Metroplex in Fort Worth, Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is not in the DFW Metroplex, but they're all over. They're literally all over. Oak Cliff, Uptown, North Dallas, as well as Austin, I think too. But they have counselors of all different specialties, as well as trainings, starting at $35 on up based on the counselor's experience. They are amazing because they have early morning appointments as well as late evening appointments and weekends. So if you've ever wanted to have the experience of counseling, work through some pain, suffering, anxiety, depression, anything, this is a perfect opportunity to seek that out and know that they are there and they are a trustworthy practice that we are behind for sure. I was trained there, as well as Julian has done some work with them as well. So yes, their motto is creative solutions to stuck problems. So definitely let them know that you heard about them from us. WeFixBrains.com. Easy way to remember them.
Yes, so catchy. And as part of that wavelength of creativity to stuck problems, they have created the Lifeology Institute for Psychotherapeutic Yoga, LISP School for short. And so what that is a cutting edge way of addressing mental health and emotional well-being through the mind-body connection. So merging Eastern and Western approach to healing. And they are training others to help clients work through psychotherapeutic yoga. So they're looking for mental health professionals, yogis, or anybody else just wanting to explore a new way of helping others through psychotherapeutic yoga. JC and I both graduated from there. I'm on staff. We obviously believe that you have to address the mind and the body to really achieve that full healing.
Yeah. And it's just such a different type of yoga. So that's the way that I teach yoga and work with my clients. So it's amazing. We love them. Thank you, Lifeology and LISP. So let's get into our topic today. This is so fun. It's like a solo episode. We don't have a guest on. So we're talking about inner child work.
Yes, which, we're gonna get into all the reasons why it might sound weird, but all the potential benefits from it.
Right. Yeah. Whenever you hear that, what do you think? Inner child work.
Yeah.
I feel like it's out, I don't know. I had a client come to me the other day and I was talking about it and she was like, oh, I've heard about that. I want to try that.
Oh,
so I think it's kind of sounds like, I don't know, interesting to people. Yeah. And then also maybe woo-woo and weird to some people.
Yeah. And are we just going to do finger paints and
yeah. What is
I'm supposed to act like a child?
it mean exactly? And how can it benefit me?
Right. Yeah. So let's maybe provide a little bit of clarity about what actual inner child work is.
Yeah.
Right? And part of it is just being able to tune in and be aware of the parts of our personality, no matter how old or how adult we are, that still react and feel in a childlike manner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's so important to note that like your personality is typically created before you're 8 years old. And which is like a very unconscious part of yourself. Like we're not always like in that 8-year-old mindset. So we're sometimes like acting out in the ways of that like little child. And so I think inner child work like really brings the unconscious child that you once were like into your adult conscious mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like if I'm reacting to my fiance or a friend or a family member in a way that's like very like overwhelmed or hysterical. I love Whitney's quote that she uses that if it's hysterical, it's historical. And if I'm like lashing out or throwing some type of tantrum, like it could probably be addressed by doing some of this inner child work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being able to kind of, yeah, rewind and look at like what happened in childhood that led you to react in that way. Because I mean, as children, we're like vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
But what's cool now is that like as adults, we have the ability to go back and give our child what it needs and respond in a way that's probably a little bit better than lashing out or
Yeah.
whatever other self-destructive behaviors that we'll get to.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the inner child, work kind of was coined and began with Carl Jung, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that psychologist. He is kind of a originator of a lot of different works that is very formative in the psychological world. So, I think that that's just cool knowing that and like gives it some credibility,
Yeah.
maybe too.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it doesn't for some people. But yeah, inner child, I like this definition that you pulled up, Julian. I don't know if you want to read that for people.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, inner child work really is just a form of self discovery that helps you access the child you once were, along with the experiences and emotions that you were taught as a child to repress. The general idea of inner child work is that if you make an effort to contact, to listen to, and communicate with and nurture your inner child, you can find and heal the roots of your issues as an adult.
Whoa, that is powerful stuff. And I will say, so my therapist is an attachment based therapist. So that means that a lot of our work is looking at my childhood and seeing how my childhood affects my relationships now. So it's basically like inner child work. So it was
Yeah.
really fun to talk about this topic. It may not be always like coin that term, but
Yeah.
it's been healing for me.
Yeah. And I can just imagine maybe some people like really wondering, well, do we really need to go back and look at that
Oh,
past,
yeah.
right? But I'll just say from like a science-based perspective with attachment, specifically years 0 to 3 years old, like you may not be able to remember things, right? Like actually you won't be able to, but the impact of that is long lasting. There is a lot of research on that too, like just in terms of like your brain formation and the way that you react to stressors. Like if your mom wasn't present in the way that you needed her to be when you're like a kid, and maybe you were like hungry and she was maybe struggling with addiction or a mental health issue
Or anxiety.
right.
Yeah.
Like you are going like that experience has been imprinted on
Yeah.
you. And like will show up in another way of like you maybe getting anxious, people aren't going to be there when you need them to be.
Yes.
So-
yeah, such a good point. I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah. So, with that being said, a couple other things I guess I just want to know about like what is like inner child work. It's that or what is the inner child? It's that part that feels like a little girl or a little boy inside of you. Like we all have that. It's that part of you that expresses your deepest emotional needs for security, for trust, nurturing, affection, touching. Like we all need that kind of stuff. And Pia Melody talks about that trauma for a child is anything less than nurturing. So it doesn't have to be this big traumatic experience that you remember, that you talk about. Like, again, like you're saying, it could be a parent having anxiety or working a lot or, trying to make ends meet, maybe that like has affected you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And do we want to like share some more examples of like what that could look like yet? Or do you want to?
Well, yeah, let's get to that in a second. A couple other things with like inner child. It's just that part that still carries pain, emotional trauma, and strong feelings. So, like I was saying earlier, anything that is hysterical might be historical, right? So, some of those feelings might be insecurity, might be loneliness, fear, anger, shame, guilt. So really think about those things whenever we're talking about this today.
Yeah. Okay. So like what you're trying to have people look at, like kind of another way of explaining to me that makes sense is like when you have an experience where you feel like you just blew things out of proportion, made like a mountain out of a molehill. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and your emotions were exaggerated for what it really was.
Yeah. Or like I can give a personal example, right? So like I noticed a theme in my life that like of being scared of being left behind, of being abandoned, and I can feel it physically in my body. Like I feel anxious. I feel like if somebody is mad at me, even like I just feel my heart racing. It feels really scary. Like I'm not in danger. Like nothing's going to happen to me. But as a child, like if I was left behind or wasn't like taken care of, that's like survival. So, and that's been an issue in some of my relationships as well. So there's an example. And yeah, let's get into what exactly are, what that can look like as the wounded child, some of the characteristics.
Yes. So, trauma is a trendy word, right?
Yeah.
So we're just like helping it,
Trauma.
break it down a bit. And I love, that definition, anything that is less than nurturing, but some examples, of course, the classic and like long lasting effects of physical, sexual, emotional abuse and neglect. And I really
Intellectual.
do want to point out, especially the emotional abuse or neglect, that like having parents that maybe weren't present because they were preoccupied with work or other, like that is valid, that really can carry on in the impact. Just because some people think like, physical or sexual abuse, like that's like a reason to struggle. But like also just not being attended to.
Is also super impactful.
Yeah. So, outside of that, if your parents divorced or there was family conflict, that is something that's obviously going to leave an imprint. And with that too, if you've taken on roles within the family that maybe weren't necessarily correct developmentally, so what we call like a parentified child. So it could be the stereotypical older child, but like that just takes on a lot. Could be that, like once again, whether the parent was struggling with addiction, mental health, or just not present and just doing, that child taking a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, I love that as like a wound or a trauma in a sense, because I don't know, I think a lot of people don't really see it that way. Like it's kind of like a positive thing. Oh, I take on a lot of responsibility. It's kind of like the parent. But yeah, it can be impactful. And I hope that people know that whenever we talk about parent-child relationships, that for the most part, parents are doing the best that they can. And it's not intentional, and we're not like bashing or, shaming parents by any means. But yeah, looking at like how our relationships have impacted us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like our parents, like their ability to be what they could for us was also influenced by their parents, right? So we're talking about healing intergenerational wounds.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And
like
so
that you said that. Yeah.
like to release any sort of blame, like acknowledge not deny, and then also have some compassion that for the most part, people were doing the best
Yeah.
that they were.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people like in our age group can have some like frustration or anger towards their parents. And I feel like this work, like it seems paradoxical, like, we're not asking you to blame your parents, but we are asking people to kind of like really look at their childhoods in a way. And by identifying it, I think that you can be more compassionate towards your parents and towards yourself ultimately.
Yeah.
Which is what we're hoping for.
Yeah, no, good points for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I also just want to go back and list some other sort of childhood experiences that could result in some wounding, and that could be, bullying, having excessive demands placed on you by parents or anybody else.
Like super high grades, like being really good at sports or
Yeah, and feeling that pressure to keep up with that,
Yeah.
to be like the other successful people in your family, right?
Yeah.
And at any point, obviously, as a kid where you were, just looked down upon for your personality, like for maybe being different or maybe being too sensitive or whatever it is. But anything that's, like the messages that you received were like, I'm not okay. Um, and then I'm just cheating here, looking at our list. Of course, you named abandonment. So anytime there's a period where there's not consistency in, and that could be like as a baby throughout, right? Teenage years, maybe, parents did leave you on an extended trip,
Yeah.
and you weren't ready for that.
Yeah. No, it can look a lot of different ways,
Yeah.
but I like what you said earlier of the feeling of not being good enough. I think that, or like something's wrong with me, or like it's kind of like you can boil it down to some core beliefs of like you're not worthy of my time or affection or whatever it is. So, yeah, these examples I feel like are helpful for people to identify with, but like that's underneath it all are those things which creates the insecurity and fear,
Yeah.
pain.
From the experiences then come our internalization of
Yes.
it in those beliefs, right? Then those beliefs kind of drive our behavior, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking of, okay, like think about now, what does it look like to have a wounded inner child as an adult, right?
Yeah.
And do you want to like talk about like what those behaviors might look like?
Yeah. Yeah. So some kind of consequences of having those wounds are a lot of like what we see in counseling, and I think what a lot of people who are not in counseling can identify with, but maybe they haven't like sought help yet or haven't identified it yet. But self-sabotage. So yeah, explain that.
Like when things are going good, they're going to find a reason to blow things up.
Yeah.
So what might that look like? I don't know. Maybe somebody like has a history of like career jumping, right? And they like find a job that they do well in, and then they might start trying to like miss work or maybe like I don't know, cause some sort of issue with the boss or whatever.
Yeah.
Just because when they found their place in the work, then somehow it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So they're going to blow it up.
Yeah, I can really see that. Like, my mind goes to relationships too, of like, if you didn't feel worthy in your relationship as a kid, then you're not going to feel worthy like in a relationship as an adult with friends or romantic partner. And so, like, find ways to not feel that worthiness ultimately.
Yeah.
So, when you find like a person who is treating you worthwhile, like if you haven't healed this, that can be hard to accept that. So self-defeating behaviors, which kind of is in line with self-sabotage way, but just the behaviors of it, self-harming behaviors, being passive aggressive, not being able to like be direct with how you feel, what you need, and getting your needs met indirectly. So maybe by manipulation or the silent treatment or
People pleasing.
people pleasing.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's a
Yeah.
good one.
I know. People pleasing
That,
actually is not a good thing.
yeah, no,
No.
no.
It's like manipulating somebody into believing that like you're worthy.
Yeah. It's like the heart of a two
Yeah.
on the Enneagram. If you don't know what we're talking about, go back to the
That is-
Enneagram episodes. But yeah, I can so relate to the people pleasing and being passive aggressive. So working on that. So yeah, and then within that, there can be like addictions and not just like drug, but maybe food or porn or work, codependency, relationships, addiction to love, relationships, and ultimately, I think one of the biggest things is low self-esteem. So lack of confidence and low self-esteem. So, let's see, a couple things that whenever I'm working with a client and have done this work in the past, so I kind of see it as like a 4-step process of like being able to, one, overcome attitudes of criticism, rejection, and denial of your inner child. So, and that looks like kind of accepting like what has happened in your childhood, seeing it for what it is.
Yeah. Which it can seem so easy, but oftentimes they're like, because we're viewing things from a kid's lens, like, and there are those messages that like, oh, I'm at fault or they're right?
Yeah.
That you kind of carry with you.
Absolutely. And I think as an adult, like if we were able to see our needs like as this little kid, like wanting attention and affection from a parent who's just not available for one reason or another, like that's sad and heartbreaking. And like I would want to care for that little kid versus like as an adult, I'm like, JC, you're so insecure, you're needy, like stop doing that. Like I'm being critical of myself versus like understanding the actual child needs. Like it gives you a totally different perspective in that way. So the second part would be bringing out your inner child, so like tapping into that. What are some ways that you think that people can like tap into that part of themselves?
Do you want to answer?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, just like being childlike, like playful, like maybe things that you like enjoyed as a kid,
Yeah.
doing that. This sounds like a little, probably woo woo, but I do this sometimes and I've had clients do it and I think it's super powerful. But like carrying around a photo of yourself as a child, because you can see that little girl or boy and it's like, holy smokes, you're a
Yeah.
lot nicer to that person.
Yeah, no, I think that's like a really powerful tool for someone who has a loud inner critic and a lot of judgment, right? Of being actually able to pause that negative self-talk and then like look at that photo of that child and be like, would I be saying that to myself?
Yeah.
Like would I tell her or him that
Yeah.
like she's never going to amount to anything?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely not. And it's not fair for us to do that as an adult. Like, it's not helpful for your self esteem, for your confidence, for what you're doing. So, the third part in kind of working through this is, and I said this a little bit earlier, but I like this explanation, is reevaluating negative feeling states in terms of positive needs of your inner child. So, again, that like insecurity and then like seeing like, well, what do I need? Like I'm needing connection, right? Or feeling needy. Yeah, I'm needing to some validation or attention or connection in that way, and I can ask for that.
Yeah, I think another popular one too, and I think with clients that I work with, is that like being able to express anger. Because
Talk more about that. Yeah.
like I don't know, I guess I find a common theme in thinking about that for myself and where that comes from about like certain emotions are not like necessarily allowed to be expressed. Right? And anger is one of those. But if we
Yeah.
can understand as like, and let our inner child be angry, right? Like, and let them throw that fit,
Yeah.
right? Then we're able then to like move through, right? And acknowledge that anger can give us strength, can tell us like when things are okay or not. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of positives to it.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. I think for me with anger, it's like super protective, and it tells me that I am uncomfortable and that sometimes I need to set a boundary, right? And so, yeah, like I love that. So negative feeling state being anger,
Yeah.
frustration.
Or sad, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't always have to put on a mask, a happy face. So
Yeah.
yeah, connecting with your inner child would in that way, like telling like your inner, like a young child who like their friends like maybe moved away, like that it's okay to cry. So even as an adult, when you're moving through transitions where friendships are changing, that like it's okay to be sad about that.
Yeah.
It might be familiar right now.
And I think that there's an aspect of like the fourth part of like kind of working inner child stuff is like if you're able to like connect with that part of yourself, like nurture that child every day. So we talk a lot about hashtag self-care, but yeah, like what is it that like smallest side of yourself like really needs today? And how can you do that like concretely, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, we've talked a little bit about benefits of doing this work, but do you want to talk a little bit more about like what those are?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I said, like earlier, we're not always able to access memories, and especially like the 0 to 3. So sometimes if you are doing this deep work, like it can bring up sort of realizations and memories. Like you are going to want to do this with like the help of a therapist,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And so,
Like the deep work.
yeah, like a,
sure.
like EMDR can do that as well as
Yeah, which is, I mean, for those that don't
Yeah.
know, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So specific type of therapy to work through like traumas and things like that.
Yeah. So yeah, just working through any kind of blind spots, basically.
Blind spots,
That's what can
yes.
help of like, yeah, that's holding you back. Yeah, and you can just like maybe full feel again for those that kind of have shut down and like lived their life more kind of numbing out or avoiding. Like being able to appropriately get in touch with the feelings that you're avoiding and learn that you can manage them, then you can just, yeah, live a more full life, right?
Yeah.
Not having to run away or do whatever you are. And then, like you said before, like you can learn to access your personal power and set those boundaries and be assertive and say no, or all those things that maybe you like couldn't as a result of your wounds.
Yeah. I just remember having Taylor Zabrowski on our podcast early on talking about it was like the Authentic Self podcast. And she talked about how we have an adapted adult self, which, and then was it a functional adult self? So, like, we've adapted our adult self based on like our childhood, and as adults we can kind of choose to maybe manage these certain emotions like appropriately in a way versus like based on our past, based on our childhood. Whenever like maybe that was appropriate then to like never say no or to please for some reason or another, but that's not going to get you very far.
Yeah, that's to get you burnt out and resentful.
And
Yeah.
depressed and anxious, and it comes with a lot of different negative attachments.
Yeah, so this is helpful for those that identify as codependent,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, then, another benefit of doing this work, like you can be accepting and self-compassionate to yourself, just have more confidence. Yeah, so I don't know. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds cool. It sounds good.
Yeah. Well, but
We're trying to sell you on it.
yeah.
Do you
And
like it yet?
yes. And we also understand like hesitations, right?
Yeah.
Because it can, I don't know, like it can seem uncomfortable and weird and
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, yeah, I think that, do you want to talk a little bit about like considerations with doing this
yeah.
work, like whether you do it at home or with a therapist?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like with therapy and the clients that we work with, right? Like we always tell them like you get to set the pace, you get to decide like what you're wanting to unpack. Like and I think that's important with inner child work. And so if you're maybe wanting to look at something that doesn't seem so monumental or like affecting your life in such a big way, then I would say like doing some journaling, some meditation, like with really focused inner child work, like that would be appropriate.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But I do think that there is this level of, and like safety in doing that when it's just you, right? And so on the flip side, if you're wanting to really look at, I guess, some bigger issues,
Yeah, and
like,
have somebody reflect back to you like an unbiased third party, like who has guidance and training to work through those like big T traumas, as we might call them.
yeah, like, yeah. So seeking therapy for that reason would probably be
Definitely.
helpful. And
And
it takes time, like, yeah, get to know your therapist and feel comfortable, right?
yeah, definitely. So, should we talk about some activities that people can do to kind of tap into this so-called inner child work?
Yeah, yeah. I know we mentioned a couple earlier, but yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot more to it.
yeah, for sure. So, yeah, one of mine that I have done is writing a letter to your childhood self. So, and that can look however you want it to look, right? So you might just pick a certain age and maybe write a letter like as an adult to that child and like what comes up for you. So being like very curious and very open and kind of just see what happens.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's an interesting way to do it.
Yeah.
I guess another way I've heard that sort of activity too is to yeah, like pick that age and then like be able as your adult self to tell that child what they needed to hear. Have
Yes.
you heard that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, so I guess maybe if you struggled with self-esteem and bullying through like junior high or high school, then like, the letter that you might write to your wounded child is like, being able to say something like, yes, I see that this hurts and it's so hard because you want friends. And these, kids seem so cool, but like the reality is like, you know, they don't know what they're saying. And those words like that they're telling you are absolutely not true. And they're insecure. And you don't have to buy into that.
Oh
Like
my
you're going
gosh.
to find those friends that
This is
accept
so
you.
empowering.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, being able to pinpoint like what was hurtful. And it's almost kind of like giving yourself kind of time to like grieve that a little bit. Like that's sad.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like
And
being able
then,
to acknowledge the emotions and then also what did you need to hear?
yeah, yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah. Um okay, so we talked about the photograph they can carry around of your little self. Um and okay, meditating. Like I guess I've heard more so like visual guided meditations, which you'll
Yeah.
lead through us. Do you know what else this looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is just kind of like you're saying, like that writing a letter to yourself. But yeah, really exploring like childhood, thinking back to like what did you feel like at this certain point in time? What did you look like? Like getting really descriptive of like everything going on. So like as a visualization, and then what did you need at that time? So it kind of is like in vivo, like it feels like you're actually feeling that, you're actually doing that, like going back to that moment, right? And I'm sure it can look many different ways. And like a quick Google search for a meditation on inner child work, like I'm sure there's plenty out there to look for too. But yeah, we'll do kind of that healing exercise of a visualization meditation at the end, just to give an idea of what that would look like. And if you want to try it out.
And you know what I like about the meditation? I'll just say is when your body gets to a more relaxed state, and knowing that like we hold trauma in our body, like it releases that, which then allows like the new formation of beliefs and thoughts about ourselves to integrate and be embodied in that way, you know?
Yes.
So I guess a reason
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
maybe explore that.
Yeah. And they all kind of like build on each other, right? Like it's like definitely not like a quick fix. Like you do this
Oh
one
yeah,
thing.
yeah. Just do this one meditation, and then
Yeah.
you'll never have any problems with self-confidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
No.
people.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Like doing, yeah. And I mean, it's a lot to like do. And if you want to like spend the time, doing this, but like doing, like writing the letter to yourself and seeing, like reflecting on that, maybe doing the meditation, reflecting on that, seeing what's different about that, carrying around the photograph. What's that like? And we talked about this earlier, but like in the sense of like an activity of like maybe you are able to write down like what were those needs that were not met as a child. So being able to journal those needs. Was it attention? Was it
Emotional support.
was it touch? Was it affirmation? Was it encouragement? What are those things that you needed? And how does that like come out sideways now? Like what are those negative feeling states? And how can you reframe that into what you need now? So exploring that by journaling. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you were mentioning earlier too, like another technique can be through sand tray therapy.
Yeah.
Do you want to share that?
Yeah. So I did this with my therapist. So I built a sand tray like based on my like childhood. So it's been a long time since I've done it. So I don't know if it was like a specific situation that happened or just who I was as a child. But and so what that looks like, sand tray therapy, which sounds like play therapy or like therapy for kids, but adults can do it too because it gets you outside of that like intellectualizing the world and having to talk about it and just being smart and
Yeah.
all that jazz, and get you into that like creative side and yeah, like kind of feeling like a child. So I love like the creative arts for therapy. But okay, back to my experience. So I remember specifically, so I took like these little miniature figures. And I put them in the sand to describe like who I was as a child. And I remember the most significant thing was that there was like this put together like child in front of like a little scared girl. And so I don't know, for me that like brought up that like I kind of felt like I had to be pretty, I had to be smart, I had to like really show the world like this certain person. But I was over here like scared, not knowledgeable, like scared of being dumb, scared of being not pretty enough, all of those things. And so it was really cool to be able to, I feel like I've worked through a lot of those insecurities of like where I am now. But yeah, I felt like I really struggled in my adulthood and high school of like I had to wear a lot of makeup and always wanted to wear like the best clothes. Like I don't need to do that anymore. Yeah, I don't base my worth off of that anymore. I felt like I kind of had to put on, which sometimes that like still comes up for me. Like, I feel like I need to be smart. But yeah, so it just helped me kind of identify like what was going on for me as a kid. So I think you could do that like in Santray. I think you could also do that by like maybe like drawing, like some type of creative art.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good for that. And yeah, I think especially for the reason that you said, if I needed to like feel put together and perfect, and for those that like felt like they had to be over responsible, like to get out of that thinking adult sort of analyzing, making sense
Yeah.
of it, and get to the feeling and the vulnerability
Yeah. I
of doing
remember
something different.
whenever I saw that and like, because I had to explain it to my, therapist at the time. And I remember crying. Like, I was just so touched and like sad for that little girl. And I like really felt like that sucks.
Yeah,
And it
that's
just felt really sad and
a lot of pressure.
insecure and a lot of pressure. Yeah. So it was a pretty powerful experience, and it helped me like be where I am today. Of like I can acknowledge when that insecurity comes up for me, and I am like kind of using that mask or that put together. But yeah, I felt like I was able to kind of like process and work through a lot of that as well. So any other activities before we get to our visualization?
Yeah, no, I think like we hit the main ones.
Yeah. Do you want to share, I know, anything about your inner child therapy experience?
No. This is me setting a boundary.
Yeah.
It's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, because,
Does it feel like vulnerable?
well, and also because I want to make sure that we have enough time for meditation.
Yeah.
And yes, because it feels vulnerable.
Yeah. It's like hard stuff. And I know, like, I did that. It was probably like 5 years ago, and I probably couldn't talk about it so laissez-faire,
Yeah.
as I am now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good stuff. But yeah, let's go ahead and we will do kind of like a healing visualization to tap into that feeling of being a child and kind of asking yourself what you needed at that time. So if you are not driving, or if you want to pause the podcast and maybe try this activity later, but we'll go ahead and get into that. So
Yeah, so find a comfortable spot
yes.
and
Yeah, so go ahead and just find like Julian said, a comfortable space, and begin to relax the muscles of the body. So you can just scan down the body through the muscles of the face, the upper body, relaxing the shoulders down the back. Feeling the weight of the hips where you're sitting or if you're lying down. Feeling the weight of the legs and the feet. And then begin to acknowledge your breath. Maybe at the base of the nostrils. Your inhale and exhale. The back of the throat, and the rise and fall of your abdomen. See if you can steady and slow down the breath. And I want you to imagine yourself sitting down in a rocking chair, getting very comfortable, and feeling yourself rocking back and forth, starting to drifting more and more, rocking back and forth, rocking gently back into time. Slowly rocking back into time. Year by year, you might imagine yourself getting younger and younger, going back through maybe the 90s or the 80s. Feeling younger and younger. So back long ago, drifting back to a time where perhaps you were very young. Imagining now that you can see the little child you were a long time ago. And just imagine seeing yourself as a kid, a child. Perhaps you can see her or him there now. What does she look like? Note what she's wearing, how old she is. Can you see where she is? Is she indoors, outdoors? See what she's doing. Look at her face and see if you can see her expression. Can you tell how this child's feeling right now? As you look at this little girl, can you recall anything that was missing in her life? Is there anything that kept her from being fully happy? If there was anyone or anything that got in the way of this little girl being completely happy and carefree, perhaps you can imagine seeing that person or situation. And if no one is there yet, perhaps you can imagine your dad or mom or whoever you would like standing in front of you right now. What does your little girl feel towards your dad or mom, the person standing in front of you? Is there anything that that child would like to say to that person? If so, it's okay to go ahead and say it now. Notice if that feels uncomfortable or difficult, or if the words feel stuck in your throat. If your little child is feeling scared or confused about saying anything, imagine that your present day adult self enters the scene right now and goes up and stands next to your little child. Now, when you're ready, imagine your adult self standing next to your little child, speaking up on your little child's behalf, whoever is there. Your adult self can say whatever she wants. Tell the parent or whoever's there whatever you need to say, whatever it was that never got expressed. If you wish, you might complete this sentence. How do you think it makes me feel that? Or you might complete the sentence, I wish you had. Tell your parent or whoever is there anything you wish they had done but didn't. When you speak up, speak loud and clear so you can be sure that whoever is there really hears you. Does the person you're facing have any response? Listen to see if they have a response. If so, you can respond to what he or she says. If not, you can just finish what you need to say. When you finish speaking, you can ask whoever is there either way to go away and to leave you alone, or to go away for a while until you're ready to talk again, or else to stay and to say that you're going to accept this person as he or she is and give him or her a hug. Now go back and see your present day adult self standing next to your child. If you're willing to pick that little girl up in your arms this very second and love her, wrap your arms around her and tell her that it's okay. Tell her that you know how she feels. Tell her that you understand. You're here and you're going to help her. You love her very much. If you could give a color to the love you feel, what color comes to mind? Surround your little child with a light of that color and let her feel the peace of being in your arms. Tell her that you think she's a great little girl, that you love the way she talks, walks, laughs, and does everything. Tell her that you care and that she's precious. And then begin to come back to the breath. Begin to deepen the breath, waking up the body. Letting go of the visualization, and maybe take some time to reflect and journal on this experience of allowing your adult self to care for your child self. Stand up for your child self. Love on that little girl. Thank you so much for listening to the Everyday Therapy Podcast. Don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes and share with your friends. It really helps us reach more people.
We might only record once a week, but we're with you every day.